The Lord be with you. So in our gospel lesson, the disciples are gathering around Jesus the Christ, and they're trying to make sense of who is this Jesus character that they are walking with? Who is this Jesus character that they are standing with? And so the guesses start to happen in our gospel reading. Perhaps Jesus, he is a prophet. I mean, God has often used messengers to communicate God's vision, and so one of the guesses is that maybe he's a prophet. Oh, no. Perhaps he is John the Baptist, another person says. John the Baptist, who was put to death by Herod, maybe he has come back from the dead to continue teaching us, right? So maybe he is John the Baptist. And then another disciple jumps up, no. He might be Elijah. Elijah, being one of the major disciples, one of the major prophets of God, who didn't die, but rather was taken up to heaven in a flaming chariot and fire. Right. You knew it. It was on the tip of your tongue. And so maybe this Jesus fellow, right? Maybe this Jesus fellow in front of us is Elijah, come back down from heaven to teach us, right? To be with us again. And then in our gospel reading, Peter pipes up. Peter says to Jesus, "You are the Messiah." Right? I use this reference in the first service, but I guess nobody's Harry Potter fans. I said 10 points for Gryffindor. Right? He got the right answer. None of y'all Harry Potter. All right. Should have known it was a busted first service. Should have been a busted second. Right? So Peter gets the right answer. He sees that Jesus is God incarnate, God himself in flesh in front of him, right? Peter has got the right answer, and he is congratulated by everyone around him. And the excitement, though, is quickly kind of diminished, right? Because as Jesus is called the Messiah, he begins to teach Peter and the other disciples that are gathered around what it means to be the Messiah. Right? And to be the Messiah means to be the one who goes and suffers and is put to death, right? That the very people that should be able to recognize him as the Messiah, the religious elite, that they will all condemn him. So to be the Messiah is to be handed over. To be the Messiah is to suffer. To be the Messiah is to be crucified and to die and to raise from the dead on the third day. This is what it means to be the Messiah. And for Peter, this is a hard thing to grasp, right? Like, this is not what he envisioned for what the Messiah would be, right? Like, have any of y'all ever seen The Lion King? You seen The Lion King? When Mufasa dies, who sees that coming? The first time you watch The Lion King, who thinks that Mufasa, right? It's Mufasa? Who thinks Mufasa's going to die? And then he dies, right? Scar grabs him, throws him off the cliff, and he dies and he's trampled. Great kings don't die like that. Great kings aren't trampled to death, right? How can it be that our king, that our Messiah could go to death, right? That's Peter's conundrum. How can our king, our Messiah, be trampled to death? That doesn't make sense for Peter. Or maybe not a cartoon movie or appropriate for kids. Have any of you seen Braveheart? Braveheart, maybe, right? And he's fighting and he's conquering, and then he dies. I'm sorry if I've ruined the ending of Braveheart for you. I seem to ruin a lot of movies for people. Braveheart dies, right? And who saw it coming? Right? Like, he's this champion warrior, he's this leader, he's raising up the rebellion, he's fighting against the English, and he's winning, and then he is handed over to death, and he's tortured, and he dies. Who saw that coming? That's not what happens to great leaders. That's not what happens to, people. That's not what happens to a Messiah, to our God. God doesn't die. And so that's Peter's struggle with what Jesus is teaching him, right? Peter has an idea of who the Messiah should be. For Peter, the Messiah is the one that's going to lead the rebellion against the Roman Empire. That Jesus, right, sword fighting, right, Jesus is going to lead the rebellion against the Roman Empire, that the Roman armies are going to be destroyed, and that Israel is going to be a great nation, and that Yahweh's glory will all be at the hand of this kind of freedom fighter Messiah. And then Jesus tells him that I'm going to be handed over. I'm going to die. right? I'm going to suffer and I'm going to die. And for them, it just doesn't work, right? So what's going on here? And so Peter, right? Peter being, I think he's bold. I see him as bold. Peter pulls Jesus aside because Jesus and him, they need to have a little chat, right? Because maybe Jesus doesn't understand what it means to be a Messiah, right? Maybe Jesus just needs my help, and I'll help him out, right? He just needs a little bit of my knowledge, and I'll help him understand what it means to be a Messiah. And so, right, he just doesn't get it yet. Jesus, you just don't get it yet. Let me explain to you what it means to be a great leader, a great king, a great Messiah. And so, Peter pulls him aside, and he begins to tell him what he thinks a Messiah should be. You can't go to death, Jesus. You can't be tortured. What are you talking about? Right? And then what happens to poor Peter? In the gospel lesson, what happens to Peter? Yeah, Jenna. He gets rebuked. He gets scolded. He gets fussed at, right? And here's the thing. I think that we can look at Peter and we can shake our heads and we can say, oh, poor, stupid Peter. You know, he didn't get it, right? He didn't get that Jesus was the Messiah and that he had to be handed over and that he had to suffer and that he had to go to death so that he could rise from death, right? So the cross leads to the tomb and the tomb to resurrection. That Peter just didn't get it. And so sometimes I think we can look at Peter and say, you just didn't get it, buddy, right? You just didn't get it. Peter, in all of his earthly knowledge, right, he thought that he had something that he could teach Jesus about what it meant to be Messiah, right? That he thought because of what he knew that he could help the divine, right? Peter thought that he knew better. And so, of course, Jesus had to go to death. I think for us that's a no-brainer. I don't know. Is that a brainer? Did I lose you? I lost you. Nice. Nicely done, Pastor. Right. So Jesus has to go to death. And so Peter doesn't get it. I think sometimes we can just we can feel like Peter just missed it. And we can even laugh at Peter. You want to fake laugh at Peter with me? Poor Peter, right? Can you all laugh with me? Poor Peter, right? He just didn't get it. And maybe Peter deserves to be laughed at. Because when he was faced with the divine presence standing in his midst, Peter instead appealed to his very earthly wisdom rather than looking at the divine that was in front of him. But here's the thing, and if you thought that I was setting you up for something, you're absolutely right. I was. When it comes to the next teaching of Jesus, that we are to pick up God's cross and to follow him, right? That we are to take up our crosses and follow Jesus, I think that sometimes we do the same thing. That when we are asked to pick up our crosses and to follow Jesus and to walk in Jesus' footsteps, we can appeal to our own knowledge rather than what Christ has revealed and done before us, right? And so when Jesus says to us, and this is scripture, so I'm reading from the word, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. I think when Jesus tells us that, that's a hard thing for us to wrap our minds around. We almost can take a second look at Jesus and be like, seriously? You want me to carry a cross, an instrument of death, to follow you with all of my life, all of my very being, all of everything that I am, and you want me to do it with this on my back, right? That you want me to pick up this instrument that was used to put him to death and to follow in him. I mean, when that falls on our ears, that almost seems like crazy talk. With all of our earthly wisdom, right? We know better, right? With all of our earthly wisdom, we know better, right? That it's not a way to live with a crucifixion instrument attached to our back. And so we very much like Peter, we want to pull Jesus aside and have a little chat. Jesus, maybe you don't understand what it means to be a Messiah. Maybe you don't understand what it means to have good Messiah followers. We can't die after you. We can't walk in your footsteps. That's too hard. And then we really start to talk it up. We're like, Jesus, don't you know that world religions these days, you don't want to talk about death. It's a very tight market. How do you want to talk about your followers dying? It's a hard thing to do to die. You want me to die? And we can even negotiate with Jesus. Well, I'll give you some Sundays, and I'll give you, some of my time, and we'll celebrate your birthday, right? Do any of y'all negotiate with Jesus, with God? I do. That's why I ask. Have you ever tried negotiating with God? I think that sometimes we all find ourselves in a point in our life that we try negotiating with God. I think we very much pull a Peter, right? We take our earthly wisdom, we take our knowledge that we have, and we put it up against the divine, right? We question what God is doing, and we say, well, maybe if, right? Well, maybe if God, right? And I think Jesus does for us the same thing that Jesus does for Peter. That Jesus hears us out. And then he says, but can I show you my way, right? Can you leave behind your old ways, all the wisdom that you think you have, and can you look to my wisdom? Can you look and see what I'm doing here? Can you see the love that I pour out time and time again in giving myself? Can you walk in those footsteps? Can you be that people for one another and for the world outside these doors? Can you take care of one another and for the world outside these doors? Can you walk in my footsteps? Can you learn my ways? I think that's God's call to us as God's people, right? To learn God's ways, to walk in those footsteps, to carry that cross with our very lives, giving of ourselves for one another. Some of you are wearing the brightest yellow-orange t-shirts ever. You're going to leave this place and you're going to go and do chores for people you might not even know. You're going to pick up trash for folks that are still going to throw their cigarette butts out the side of the window, all to make this world a better place, all to make people help them to see the grace of God, what God has done, right? And I think in this, let's give some more examples, right? Like, that's God works our hands. Do you know how many hours were spent cleaning out this basement down here? People gave so much time cleaning out this basement. That's crazy that you would give so much time to clean out a basement, or that you would give so much time to help people that you don't know, or that you would give your time to weed whack, all the poles out here, or that you would give your time to level out the gravel, or that you would give your time as a Sunday school teacher to help our little ones grow in faith, or that you would give your time, your life, your energy, your very self, all for Christ's sake. That's crazy. That you would walk in the footsteps of Jesus Christ. And I think the same reaction that we have for Peter and his faith, and for Jesus and how he carries that cross, is the same way that people look at us, right? As Christ followers, people look at us and say, those people up on the hill, they've lost it, right? They've lost it. They care so much for God. They care so much for one another. They take care of one another. They care so much for the people around them. Who are they? They must be nuts. They must be nuts to be so filled with the love of God that they're willing to echo that to one another, to the world around them, and to their friends and neighbors and people they've never even met before. To carry that cross through the world, that's our calling. Amen? Amen. Amen.